Okay, good morning and welcome to today's presentation about the stigma that persists when it comes to dementia and what we here at the Alzheimer Society are doing about it. So my name is Shelby Berry, and with me here today is Chris Van Leuven, and we are both education coordinators here at the Alzheimer Society of Peterborough, Kawartha Lakes, Northumberland, and Haliburton. So we're thrilled to be here with you today. So each year, we recognize Alzheimer's Awareness Month in January. Locally, our Alzheimer's Society is introducing two new initiatives geared to raising awareness about the experience of living with dementia. So today we're going to tell you all about our new Be the Missing Piece awareness campaign, which aims to dispel the myths which exist when it comes to the experience of living with dementia. We're also going to take some time to talk about enabling EDIE. And enabling EDIE is our newly acquired virtual reality based education program, which allows participants to gain a firsthand perspective of what it's like to live with dementia. So we're excited to share these two initiatives with you today. So let's get started with introducing our brand new Be the Missing Piece awareness campaign. So who hasn't said something they later regret, after giving it some thought? You might be surprised to learn that over 50% of Canadians admit to saying insulting things or negative things about people living with dementia. The small act of thinking about the words we use and how we treat people who are living with dementia can have a vast ripple effect. So on the screen, you can see a sample of the messaging that will be part of this Be the Missing Piece awareness campaign. So here we are encouraging people to think about the words they use when describing the experience of dementia or when describing people living with dementia. We believe that reframing the way we speak about dementia can change the way that dementia is perceived. And that idea really became the basis of this campaign. So as we go through the slides, you'll see some of these different images that were created as part of this awareness campaign. So as I kind of alluded to there, the Be the Missing Piece campaign was created in response to the negative statements that we at the Alzheimer Society hear every single day. These statements are said to and about people living with dementia. The goal of the campaign is to raise awareness about the issue and stamp out the stigma surrounding dementia by drawing attention to the language people use without thinking, including comments that may be rude or dismissive or hurtful, or maybe comments that are meant to bring a laugh, like a joke, but they don't have that effect. Janet, who we will see on the screen here soon, and she's one of the faces of the campaign. She kind of described this language that's being used by saying it's bullying pure and simple. If we think about some of these things that are said, it could fall under that category. Canadian society is becoming increasingly inclusive and sensitive to the feelings of others. Yet we continue to hear stigmatizing language about people living with dementia. So with this campaign, we really asked why, and what can we do about that? Prejudice and intolerance are often formed because of stereotypes, myths, misconceptions, and fear of a particular group of people, causing them to maybe be seen as other or less deserving of dignity and respect. Making jokes about, old timers disease and calling people demented are classic examples of stigmatizing language surrounding dementia. There's a world of a difference between being in the joke and being the butt of the joke. Talking over or past people who are living with dementia as though they aren't there can be dismissive and dehumanizing for that person. And it really happens more often than we may think or than we may realize. So this Be the Missing Pieces campaign is a call to action. It's a call to action for us to change our conversation about dementia by stopping and thinking about the words that we use and by making space for people living with dementia as well. So on the screen here, you see the faces of the Be the Missing Piece campaign. And it's important to us here at the Alzheimer Society and for our team to build relationships with our clients. So each of the people that you see here on the screen are involved in our services. They access our services, they attend our programs. And so it was important for us to build a relationship with them and to draw from their unique perspectives and their lived experiences in the creation of this campaign. So they helped us to learn about some of the things that they've heard, said about dementia after they got a diagnosis and things like that. So we are so very appreciative to Janet, Teresa, Doug, Jen, and Irene for allowing us to share their stories in order to shed light on the experience of living with and supporting someone who lives with dementia. So you'll see them featured on the different graphics for this campaign. The other thing that you may have noticed on the slides for this campaign is in the bottom, you'll see there's an image of a brain, and the brain is made up of different puzzle pieces to create that image of the brain, but there's one missing piece, and that missing piece is the yellow piece. So because this campaign is an awareness campaign, it's a call to action. The question here that we want to ask people is, how can you be the missing piece for someone living with dementia? How can you help to kind of minimize that stigma and support people living with dementia so that they feel included? So that's what that image is reflective of, and this question here about how can you be that missing piece for someone living with dementia. So let's take a look at some of the ways that we can do that. So the first thing that we can do, which we've kind of talked about already, is we can think about what we say and the words that we use. So becoming the missing piece for someone living with dementia can be as simple as thinking about the words that we use, as we're talking each and every day. So instead of saying something like someone is suffering from dementia, we could ask ourselves, who says that they're suffering? They're definitely living with dementia, which can mean that they may live well for many years with dementia. So when we switch our language, this is one of those examples. When we refer to someone that has dementia, we often say, Joan is living with dementia, Bob is living with dementia. So that shift in language can have a lasting impact. A diagnosis of dementia doesn't have to be seen as hopeless or devastating, but it is challenging and life-changing. The Alzheimer Society is the best resource for trustworthy help and advice on how to live well with any type of dementia, not just Alzheimer's disease. And a full range of supports and services is available free of charge, ranging from social and recreation programs, like our Minds in Motion program and the Young Onset Day Service, to education and support for care partners. So you don't need a diagnosis to contact our intake coordinator, Casey, who will feature a bit later, and to become a client. So we have a very inclusive space here for those living with dementia. The second thing that we can do is stop the stigma. So think about different ways that we might stop the stigma, and in doing so, we can help change a life. So it might surprise you to learn that there is a big stigma still surrounding dementia. So if we think about the jokes that we've heard or possibly made, about Alzheimer's disease, or maybe thoughtlessly calling someone demented, words can hurt. We have probably all said things in the past, that we might later regret, or as we learn more about the disease, we think back and say, oh, that wasn't the right thing to say. But for whatever reason, dementia is one of the subjects where it seems acceptable to maybe tell a joke or to say something that might be dismissive or negative. So we ask here, why not be part of ending that now with this campaign? We may not realize how stigma may impact those who do not have a diagnosis of dementia, but they may be concerned about their memory. They may be concerned about some of the changes that they're noticing. And social stigma can really play a role in preventing people and stopping people from getting an early diagnosis, which is really an important part, in terms of getting the right supports early on and benefiting from, new medical advances, for example. There have been some exciting advancements with drug treatments for Alzheimer's disease, but in every case, an early diagnosis is required to benefit from some of these breakthroughs. So knowing that stigma is a barrier, it could be really preventing people from accessing some of these treatments. The next thing that we can do to be a missing piece for someone living with dementia is to be a friend to someone living with dementia and to their care partner or family member. So Janet, who we heard from earlier, she also said, I've still got things to do. So there's a lot of living to be done following a diagnosis of dementia. And it's also important to know that there is a Canadian Charter of Rights for people living with dementia. So this charter was launched in September 2018 by the Alzheimer Society of Canada. The landmark charter was the culmination of work by the Society's advisory group, which was made up of people living with dementia from all across Canada. And it was really important for them to have it recognized that the rights of people living with dementia matter. So they played an integral part of getting that charter developed. So when we talk about being a friend for a person living with dementia, what might that look like? So we could pick up the phone. We could check in with a friend who's living with dementia, see how they're doing. We could make a coffee date. We could even just say, I'm just calling to say hi to that person. A diagnosis of dementia can be very lonely for the person living with dementia and their families, but it doesn't have to be. Many people living with dementia do say that they notice some of their social circles changing. Their friends maybe don't reach out like they once did. So we don't want to let the fear of saying the wrong thing mean that we don't say anything at all. So being that missing piece for someone could really just still being that friend to that person and connecting with them. And it doesn't take a lot of effort to make space for people living with dementia. A little patience and understanding and curiosity, about their experience, checking in with them can go a long way. So simple gestures like those ones that we just mentioned can really have a lasting impact. And it's also time for us to change kind of the picture or the image of what dementia looks like, because this assumption of what dementia looks like can often act as a barrier for maybe maintaining friendships with the person living with dementia or their family member. People are being diagnosed with dementia at early ages, yet often at earlier ages, but often the mental picture is of an older person, in the later stages of the disease. That kind of remains that central image that many people have. And this is not the case for many people when they've just reached their diagnosis. What they're really often looking for is to continue life like normal. So it's really important for us to reach out to that person and maintain that friendship. The fact is that over 300,000 people in Ontario are living with dementia right now. This number is expected to triple within the next 30 years. So by 2050, over 750,000 Ontarians will live with dementia. So people living with dementia are your family, friends, and neighbors. This is why it's important to learn about the realities of the disease now, so that we can better prepare, to be in a position to cope and to provide support to those around us down the road. So as we see on here, another important thing is to learn about the realities of the disease and learn about the facts of the disease. And so I'm going to turn it over to Chris now to talk a bit more about that.
Right. Thank you, Shelby. Yeah, so as Shelby was kind of touching on there, sometimes, what we don't understand or what we don't know a lot about, that can create, some fear, and that misunderstanding and that fear can perpetuate some of the negative stereotypes that we hear. So the more that we know, the more that we can learn, the easier it is to overcome those misconceptions. And that goes a long way when it comes to eliminating stigma. So let's take some time now. We're going to learn a little bit more about the basics of dementia and talk a bit about the common types of dementia now. So the most commonly asked question that we hear at the Alzheimer Society is, what is the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's disease? Well, the term dementia doesn't actually refer to one specific disease. So instead, it's an overall term or an umbrella term for a set of symptoms that are caused by disorders that affect the brain. And these symptoms can be things like memory loss. That's kind of one of the most common ones we talk about. But it can also be things like problems with language or difficulty performing familiar tasks. So Alzheimer's disease, this is where the clarification comes. Alzheimer's disease is just one cause of those symptoms. But believe it or not, there's actually over 100 identified forms of dementia. We're going to look now at some of the most common types of dementia. So these 4 types are what we call irreversible types. So that means that we don't have a cure for them at this time. And we're going to start with the most common, so that's Alzheimer's disease. And it accounts for 60 to 80% of all cases of dementia. The damage from Alzheimer's disease generally starts in the hippocampus. So that's where we make memories. And that's why we might notice difficulty with short-term memory as an early symptom. Damage from the disease will eventually slowly progress to other brain regions as well. So we call it a progressive disease. Next on our list on the screen here, we have vascular dementia. And vascular dementia occurs because of impaired blood flow to the brain. So this is usually due to a stroke. And this loss of blood flow results in a loss of oxygen or oxygen deprivation for those brain cells. And once that oxygen is cut off, that causes damage to the brain cells. The location of the stroke in the brain determines what type of symptoms that the person might experience. So, depending on where that stroke happened, which lobe of the brain, that's going to determine what cognitive changes that we see. Next, we have Lewy body dementia. So with Lewy body dementia, the areas of the brain that are involved in movement and thinking are the most affected. So a person might experience physical symptoms similar to those as Parkinson's disease. So we might notice that they have rigidity or stiffness of their muscles. They may have tremors or shaking. We might notice that they have that stooped posture and the slow shuffling movements that we often associate with Parkinson's disease. But along with that, the person also has cognitive symptoms that are similar to those present in Alzheimer's disease. So we'll see perhaps that loss of memory, difficulties with language, difficulties with reasoning. Marked fluctuations in alertness might also be experienced, and visual hallucinations, so that's seeing things that aren't really there, are common in Lewy body dementia, and they're generally worse at times of increased confusion. The last type of irreversible dementia that we're going to talk about today is frontotemporal dementia. And that is as well an umbrella term. And it categorizes a group of rare disorders that primarily affect the frontal lobe, so the lobe of the brain that's right behind our forehead, and our temporal lobes, which is the lobes of our brain just above our ears. And those areas of our brain are generally associated with our personality, our behavior, our emotions, our language, speech, our ability to understand abstract thinking, and movement. In some cases with frontal temporal dementia, the brain cells in those areas shrink and die off. And in other cases, those brain cells actually get larger and they contain these round silvers, Pick's bodies. And so that's what occurs in Pick's disease, which is a form of frontotemporal dementia. In both situations, the changes in the brain lead to changes in behavior and problems with speech in the early stages. So it's estimated that only 2 to 5% of dementia cases are frontotemporal dementia. However, and interestingly, frontotemporal dementia actually accounts for up to 20% of all dementias in those who are diagnosed under the age of 65. So those types of dementia that we just talked about are irreversible types. We don't have a cure for them. But there's many conditions that are temporary or create a temporary dementia or a reversible dementia, where the symptoms that the person is experiencing can be treated and can be reversed. So unlike Alzheimer's disease, which can't be reversed. It's important to see your doctor if you're experiencing any changes to your norm. Treatable conditions can be reversed or cured, and the brain can regain the lost functions once that treatment happens. And these treatable conditions include things like depression. So depression can mimic symptoms of dementia, like mood changes, personality changes, apathy, loss of ambition, or social isolation. Delirium is another treatable cause of dementia symptoms. So generally with delirium, what we notice is a severe onset. So we see those severe dementia symptoms in a really steep onset over a short period of time. So within hours or days, we're noticing marked changes. And generally with delirium, it's brought on by an undiagnosed infection. So oftentimes it's associated with an undiagnosed urinary tract infection. But once the person's seen a doctor, it's acknowledged that they have a urinary tract infection, they're put on antibiotics. Once those antibiotics start working, then the symptoms of the delirium are resolved. Next, we have medication side effects. So this could be a side effect of a certain medication, or maybe a side effect of not taking that medication properly or taking too much of a medication, and that can cause a temporary dementia. Metabolic disorders like liver disease, diabetes, even dehydration can cause symptoms of dementia. A vision or a hearing impairment, so if that's left untreated, it can cause things like confusion or disorientation. But there again, if we get the person the proper glasses or lenses to correct their vision, if we get them set up with a hearing aid, then we see those symptoms resolve. Next, we have sleep disorders. So sleep is really imperative when it comes to our physical and our mental well-being. So things like sleep disorders, insomnia, or sleep apnea can result in those dementia type symptoms like confusion. But if we, speak to our doctor and we're able to maybe treat that sleep apnea with a CPAP machine, then the person's getting a better restful sleep, and we see those dementia symptoms resolve. And lastly, here on our list, we have nutritional disorders. So that could be a dietary or a vitamin deficiency, maybe a B12 deficiency or an iron deficiency, that can cause or result in some dementia symptoms as well. So it's very important. I just want to reiterate again, if you're noticing any changes to your norm, to see your doctor, because even if these symptoms seem like they might be dementia symptoms, there is a chance that there's something else going on that could be addressed, and you could receive treatment and resolve those symptoms. All right. So that was a kind of a brief Dementia 101, or a brief overview. But let's continue our conversation now when it comes to learning the facts about dementia, starting with who is affected. So for you, what comes to mind when you envision or stop to think about a person with dementia? For most people, you might picture an elderly person in the later stages of dementia. But here's the thing, dementia doesn't just happen to older people. So age is still the greatest risk factor for developing dementia, but there's still people in their 50s and their 40s, even in their 30s and 20s, that also develop dementia. And so when somebody receives a diagnosis of dementia under the age of 65, we call that young onset dementia. And it accounts for an estimated 2 to 8% of all dementia cases. Right now, we have 28,000 Canadians under the age of 65 who are living with young onset dementia. So we've kind of touched on some of the basics of knowledge when it comes to dementia, but chances are, if you've taken the time to join us today, you're looking for more information. And you might be wondering where to find information that is reliable, information that's accurate. There is a lot of information out there. It can be quite overwhelming. So how do you know when it comes to Alzheimer's disease, when it comes to dementia, how do you know that the information that you found is true? So we live in an information age. You know, you can hop on Google and Google anything. But it's important to recognize that not all of the information that we find online, especially when it comes to dementia, is accurate. So we always want to consider the source of information. We want to seek out those trustworthy and reputable experts in the field of dementia education and research. So the Alzheimer Society provides a really useful guide and tips for sourcing reliable dementia information. And you can find it at the link that's written up on the slide. And at the end of the presentation, I'll be sure to share that link in the chat.
Great, thanks, Chris. So another important part of the conversation around stigma is related to getting a diagnosis and accessing support early. So we talked a bit earlier about how stigma can sometimes be a barrier for this. So you might not realize this, but those stigmatizing attitudes towards dementia, again, it could really prevent people from acknowledging new symptoms that they may be experiencing and seeking help. Because of the negative attitudes that persist when it comes to dementia, a person may not want to disclose to others that they are experiencing symptoms, like changes with their memory, or they might be worried that it will affect their relationships, that they have with their friends and their family members or their colleagues. So they might not want to disclose that. This may mean, though, that they miss out on the benefits of an early diagnosis. So again, you can be the missing piece by helping to change attitudes and remove prejudice towards dementia within your own social circle. So, that's where we can start within our own social circles, and then hopefully that will have kind of a trickle effect as well. So let's look at 10 reasons why getting an early diagnosis is so important. So people with dementia can live meaningful and productive lives for many years after an early diagnosis. An early diagnosis helps both the person and caregivers learn about dementia, set realistic expectations, and plan for their future together. So on the screen here, you can see 10 benefits of receiving an early diagnosis that we've identified, and we'll go through each one in a little bit more detail. So the first benefit is you can get an accurate diagnosis, so you kind of know what you're working with, you know what to expect. As Chris alluded to, some treatable conditions can produce symptoms similar to dementia. So we want to make sure we check in with our healthcare provider to rule, any of those things out. Similarly, other possible causes of confusion could be attributed to maybe poor sight or poor hearing that we might want to get checked out. So because of all these kind of various factors that might be at play, it's important to arrange a full medical assessment if you notice any changes in abilities, moods, memory, personality, or behavior. The second benefit of an early diagnosis is you can become more actively involved in your personal decisions, including decisions related to healthcare. So earlier in the disease process, you'll be able to participate more actively in your own healthcare decisions and having conversations about future plans. And these are all part of your rights that you can assert, and again, bringing it back to that Canadian Charter of Rights for people living with dementia. The third benefit is that we can use treatments more effectively when we have that early diagnosis. So treatments of Alzheimer's disease and other dementias is typically most effective when started early in the disease process. And this includes both medications as well as alternative therapies as well. The fourth benefit is that you can focus on what's important. So an early diagnosis can allow you to set priorities based on what's important to you. Maybe it's traveling, maybe it's pursuing new goals or checking some goals off, your list that you haven't done yet, or maybe deciding when you want to stop working. Some people are diagnosed with the dementia when they are still working. So again, setting those priorities and focusing on what's important. Another benefit here is that you can make empowering choices. So an earlier diagnosis allows you to make informed decisions about legal, financial, and care matters, and to also make those decisions and your wishes known to family and friends so that they know what you want. The sixth benefit that we see here is that you can take advantage of resources. So both you and your family can benefit from local Alzheimer Society information, support, and education programs that can help you to learn how you can live well with dementia. And in turn, a benefit we see here is that your family will be better able to support you. If your family can understand the disease you're facing and the challenges that can come with its progression, they are better able to support you and to get that help when it's needed. When we have an early diagnosis, we're also in a better position to speak out. So those living with dementia with an early diagnosis could join other people living with dementia who are making their voices heard, such as with the advisory committee that developed the Canadian Charter of Rights for people living with dementia. They can help raise awareness about the disease and the need for quality care and the need for increased funding for research and programs. So really taking on that advocacy role. And another benefit to an early diagnosis is that you can help advance research. So you can participate in clinical trials and other research to help improve diagnosis and to enhance care. So that can be a big role that people play as well. And the last benefit here, which we've kind of been alluding to throughout this whole presentation, is you can help reduce stigma. So by getting an early diagnosis of dementia, by living life to the fullest, sharing your experience of living with dementia with others can be very helpful in helping to reduce the stigma of the disease and encouraging others to reach out for support. Overall, we recognize that receiving a diagnosis of dementia can be scary. It can mean progressive changes to your or the person's abilities, which will eventually affect many aspects of their lifestyle. However, it shouldn't mean that the person with dementia is no longer included, that they face discrimination, or that they lose their dignity. If those losses were no longer a factor, if people could receive a diagnosis of dementia with the knowledge that there was acceptance and support waiting for them on the other side, they would feel encouraged, to talk to their doctor about their concerns sooner rather than later. So those are some of those benefits of an early diagnosis. The Alzheimer Society has developed language guidelines for anyone who lives with, supports, or works with people living with dementia or their caregiver. And these guidelines, we've been talking about this campaign and the importance of the words that we use. So these guidelines can help to promote consistent, respectful language around dementia. So you can find all of these guidelines in our person-centered guidelines, which are on our website, and we'll be sure to put the link for this into the chat as well. So we hope that you've enjoyed learning more about our new awareness campaign, the Be the Missing Piece campaign. And we want you to remember and take away that you can be the missing piece for someone living with dementia and their care partner by being part of the change. So again, for more information, you can check out bethemissingpiece.ca, which is the website that has kind of many of the images and graphics that you see in today's presentation. You can see there on the website as well. So we're going to shift now. That's that one initiative that we kind of talked about. And another new initiative happening at the Alzheimer Society of Peterborough, Court Lakes, Northumberland, Haliburton that we're excited to tell you about is our new education program, Enabling EDIE. So I'm going to turn it over to Chris to talk a bit more about that program.
Great. Thanks, Shelby. Yeah, so we are so very excited to tell you about Enabling EDIE, which is our newly acquired virtual reality-based education program. So this program was developed by Dementia Australia, and we are grateful to be the only Alzheimer Society in Canada to own the rights to offer it here. In fact, we're only the second facilitators of this program in our country. So we're feeling pretty good about being able to bring this in particular to our region. So by using VR technology, we are able to give participants the experience of seeing through the eyes of someone living with dementia. And in our mind, there's no better way to build understanding when it comes to the realities of the disease and to reduce stigma than by providing the opportunity to feel what it's like firsthand. In fact, we're already using EDIE to spread awareness at the provincial level. So in the image on the screen, you can see Member of Provincial Parliament, Sylvia Jones of Duffer and Caledon, and she's wearing one of our VR headsets and taking in a demo of the EDIE program. MPP Jones is also our Provincial Minister of Health, so that makes her a real VIP when it comes to creating change related to dementia care. Anyone that we've introduced to EDIE comments on how impactful that experience is. So when you don the headset, you have that chance to walk in EDIE's shoes. You're navigating the visual and perceptual challenges that can be caused by dementia. It's really not an experience that one is likely to forget. And it's our hope that policymakers like MPP Jones, they're going to take what they've learned and use it. So take what they've learned from EDIE and really use it as inspiration to take action when it comes to improving dementia care in our province. So the educational dementia immersive experience, which is where we get the name EDIE from, it's an interactive 3-hour workshop that enables participants to see the world through the eyes of a person living with dementia using that high-quality virtual reality technology. The workshop's available to a variety of audiences. So it could be healthcare providers who work with people living with dementia. as well as care partners, family members, and friends of those living with dementia. We also offer this workshop to businesses and organizations who are interested in learning more about dementia in order to better serve their customers and their clients. So the workshop itself, it's facilitated by members of the Alzheimer Society of Peterborough, Kawartha Lakes, Northumberland, and Haliburton staff team. And during the session, participants have the chance to meet EDIE, who is a man living with dementia, and his wife, Marcy. And what happens in the session? So we first kind of give some instructions for using the virtual reality headset. And then workshop attendees get to use the equipment to have this immersive experience in which they become EDIE and attempt to navigate through his home at nighttime. And some unexpected challenges and barriers arise as the person is navigating through EDIE's bedroom and his living room. And those challenges come up because of the changes in EDIE's sensory abilities related to his dementia. The rest of the workshop is geared to building an understanding of EDIE's symptoms and thinking of strategies for supporting him to live well with dementia, including any modifications that could be made to his environment. Participants leave that session with new insight for what it's like to live with dementia, which helps to foster a sense of empathy and a sense of understanding. They also gain skills and build confidence to enhance communication and improve interactions with those living with dementia. For care partners and healthcare providers that take part in the workshop, they leave with the tools that they need to create a supportive plan to enable the person with dementia to be as independent as possible for as long as possible. For business groups, staff teams leave with insight into the challenges that people who live with dementia face when it comes to navigating through their communities. And this knowledge really allows business operators to create some evidence-based policies and put in place practices that focus on accessibility needs for customers with dementia and their care partners. Let's take a minute just to look at some of the learning outcomes of the EDIE workshop. So it's our belief that participants are going to leave with a better understanding of the realities of dementia. They're going to have the ability to identify the support needs in partnership with a person living with dementia and their care partners. They're going to leave with a starting point for developing that support plan that focuses on enabling the person to live more confidently with dementia. They're also going to leave with best practices for effective communication for interacting with a person living with dementia, and some suggestions when it comes to environmental modifications that can help a person with dementia to live more independently. So if this sounds interesting to you, I'm going to pass it over to Shelby, and she has some details to share about upcoming EDIE sessions for care partners and how to set up sessions for staff groups.
Great, thank you, Chris. So the staff here at the Alzheimer Society of Peterborough, Kawartha Lakes, Northumberland, and Haliburton are thrilled to be able to offer some upcoming opportunities for care partners who are clients of the Alzheimer Society to experience EDIE. So as mentioned by Chris, the 3-hour workshop is delivered in person, and we have sessions scheduled in Peterborough on Tuesday, March 5th, and in Coburg on Thursday, June 6th. And we're in the process of planning a May date for clients in the Lindsay area as well. This workshop is offered free of charge for our clients. So if you're interested in participating, please reach out to your client support coordinator here at the Alzheimer Society to find out if EDIE is a good fit for your learning and how you might go about registering. And if you are not a client with us, please connect by calling our office and speaking with our intake coordinator, Casey, who we will feature on a slide at the end of the presentation so you know how you can get in touch with her. As Chris mentioned, the EDIE workshop is also available to businesses and organizations. So nearly 50,000 people live with or support someone living with dementia throughout our counties of Peterborough, Kawartha Lakes, Northumberland, and Haliburton. So you may not have been aware of it, but the chances are high that you have encountered someone living with dementia in your workplace. As businesses and organizations strive to offer the best and most accessible service, are you aware, of kind of the environmental and interpersonal challenges that can impact a person living with dementia's ability to navigate to business like yours? And we're hoping that this workshop will help kind of bring some of that to light. So through the Enabling EDIE workshop, with the use of the virtual reality technology, you will have the opportunity to step into the shoes of someone living with dementia, to see the world through their eyes, and to gain that firsthand knowledge of the experience of living with dementia. This hands-on immersive experience provides information you need to make your business more welcoming, a more inclusive space for your customers and your clients, who may be living with dementia. If you would like this workshop to kind of engage in this and you think it would be of benefit to your staff team, and you would like to coordinate a session, you can go about that by visiting enablingedie.ca, and on there you'll see that there's an online form that you can complete. The workshop itself is $1,500 for a group of 15 participants. And there's also a not-for-profit rate for not-for-profit organizations, and they can receive the training at a discounted rate of $1,200. So as you can see on the screen there's the translation of the cost per person. We also wanted to just note that we are offering the workshop within our 4-county service area only at this time. So as Chris mentioned, we're one of the few that has it across the country, but at the moment we're focusing on offering it within our catchment area. So living with and supporting someone with dementia, it's not easy, and we want you to know that you're not alone, and the Alzheimer Society is here to help. So I just mentioned Casey, and I mentioned that if you are unsure if you're a client with us, or if you have a client support coordinator, or you know that you're not, and you would like to connect because you're interested in either our services in general or learning more about Enabling EDIE and possibly attending one of the upcoming sessions, please do not hesitate to connect with Casey. She is our intake coordinator. So Casey is that first point of contact for people who are not yet clients already. And she can hear your story and connect you with the right services, the right person, and the right resources to meet your needs. So you can reach Casey at the phone number there displayed on the screen, or her email address is also there as well. All right, and here is my contact information and Chris's contact information. If you kind of have any questions that come up, lingering questions, feel free to connect with us through email or again through phone. But we will take some time now I'll stop sharing my screen and we'll stop the recording.